Sam had always been drawn to the sea. As a seasoned scuba diving enthusiast, he had explored countless underwater landscapes, but nothing thrilled him more than the discovery of an untouched shipwreck. One sunny morning, off the coast of a small island, he spotted the outline of an old vessel on his sonar. Excited by the find, he quickly donned his gear and plunged into the deep blue waters. As he descended, the wreck came into view, its rusted hull encrusted with coral and marine life. The ship seemed to be frozen in time, a haunting remnant of a bygone era. Sam's heart raced with anticipation as he swam closer, his flashlight cutting through the murky water. The name of the ship, barely visible under layers of algae, read the Persephone. Inside the wreck, the water grew inexplicably cold, sending shivers down Sam's spine despite his wetsuit. He pushed forward, navigating through narrow passages and debris-strewn corridors. The sensation of being watched intensified, making him uneasy. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he saw a shadow move out of the corner of his eye. Shaking off the feeling, Sam continued his exploration. In the captain's quarters, he found an old, waterlogged journal. Intrigued, he carefully tucked it into his waterproof bag, eager to examine it on the surface. As he turned to leave, a sudden chill enveloped him, and he felt a light touch on his shoulder. Whirling around, he found himself alone. Unease gnawed at him, but he dismissed it as nerves. Back on shore, Sam opened the journal. The pages, though damp and fragile, were still legible. As he read, a horrifying story unfolded. The Persephone had been the site of a gruesome mutiny. The crew, driven by greed and madness, had turned on each other. The captain had tried to maintain order, but was ultimately overpowered and brutally murdered, along with his loyal officers. The ship had been cursed by their violent deaths, destined to haunt the waters where it sank. That night, Sam was plagued by vivid nightmares. He dreamt of the mutiny, witnessing the horrific events as if he were there. Blood and screams filled his mind, and the anguished faces of the doomed sailors haunted him. He woke in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. Over the next few days, the nightmares intensified. He began seeing apparitions of the sailors, their hollow eyes staring at him accusingly. Objects in his home moved on their own, and he heard whispers in the dead of night, urging him to return to the wreck. The spirits of the Persephone seemed determined to drag him back to the depths, seeking closure for their untimely end. Desperate for answers, Sam sought out a local historian, an elderly woman named Clara. She listened intently as he recounted his experiences, her face growing pale. "The spirits of the Persephone are restless," she said gravely. "They are bound to the ship by their violent deaths, unable to move on. You disturbed their resting place, and now they want you to join them. What can I do?" Sam asked, his voice trembling. "There might be a way to appease them," Clara replied. "You must return to the wreck and perform a ritual to release their spirits. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to break the curse." Armed with Clara's instructions, Sam returned to the wreck. As he descended, the water felt colder than before, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. He reached the captain's quarters and retrieved the journal, reciting the incantation Clara had given him. The water around him began to churn, and ghostly figures emerged from the shadows. The spirits of the sailors, their faces twisted with anger and sorrow, surrounded him. Sam's voice shook as he continued the ritual, pleading for their forgiveness and release. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, one by one, the spirits began to fade, their expressions softening as they dissolved into the water. The temperature gradually returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted. The curse had been broken. Sam surfaced, exhausted but relieved. The nightmares ceased, and the apparitions vanished. He had faced the darkness of the Persephone and survived. The wreck remained a haunting memory, a testament to the tragic events that had unfolded there. But now, the spirits were at peace, and Sam could finally leave the past behind. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the remote beach. Laughter echoed through the air as a group of friends, Sarah, Mark, Jess, and Tom, set up their campfire for the night. They had traveled to this secluded spot for a weekend getaway, far from the hustle and bustle of city life. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and a cool breeze rustled through the palm trees, creating the perfect ambience for their escape. As the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle overhead, Mark stood up, stretching his arms. "I'm going for a swim," he announced, his voice cheerful. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowing. It's getting dark. Come on, it'll be fun, Mark insisted, grinning. Besides, the water looks amazing. Reluctantly, Sarah nodded, and Mark jogged towards the ocean, stripping off his shirt. He dove into the waves, his figure soon disappearing into the darkness. The friends continued to chat and roast marshmallows, occasionally glancing towards the water to check on Mark. Minutes turned into an hour, and a creeping unease began to settle over them. "Where is he?" Jess asked, her voice tinged with worry. "He's been gone too long." Tom stood up, his eyes scanning the dark water. "Mark!" he called out, but there was no response. Panic started to rise among them. They grabbed flashlights and ran to the water's edge, calling Mark's name repeatedly. The beam of light from their flashlights danced over the surface of the ocean, revealing nothing but the rolling waves. "He couldn't have gone far," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "We need to find him." They searched tirelessly, their shouts growing hoarse. Hours passed, and when dawn finally broke, their friend was still missing. Exhausted and desperate, they contacted the authorities, who launched a full-scale search operation. Divers scoured the waters and helicopters hovered overhead, but there was no trace of Mark. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and the search was eventually called off. The beach, once a place of laughter and friendship, now held only sorrow and unanswered questions. The friends left, their spirits broken, each grappling with the inexplicable loss in their own way. Years later, Sarah found herself drawn back to that beach. The memory of Mark's disappearance haunted her dreams, and she felt an unshakable need to return, hoping for closure. She set up a tent near the same spot where they had camped that fateful night. The beach was eerily unchanged, as if time had stood still. As night fell, Sarah sat by the fire staring at the dark waves. A soft whisper carried by the wind brushed past her ears, sending a chill down her spine. She turned, but saw no one. The beach was empty. Suddenly, she noticed something strange. Mysterious footprints leading from the water's edge up the beach. They were wet and fresh, as if someone had just emerged from the ocean. Sarah's heart pounded as she followed the trail, the footprints vanishing just as abruptly as they had appeared. "Mark!" she whispered, the name barely audible. A cold breeze swept over her, and she heard it again. A faint whisper, almost like a voice calling her name. She looked out towards the water and gasped. A ghostly figure stood waist deep in the waves, its outline shimmering in the moonlight. Sarah. The voice was unmistakably Mark's, but distorted, echoing as if from a great distance. Tears filled her eyes as she took a hesitant step towards the ocean. "Mark, is that you?" The figure beckoned her, its form flickering. As she got closer, the air grew colder and the whispers intensified, filling her mind with fragmented memories and emotions. "Come back, Sarah." The voice was both a plea and a warning. She stopped, her instincts screaming at her to turn and run. "I can't," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't leave you." Suddenly, the figure began to dissolve, merging with the waves. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a storm. She fell to her knees, clutching her head, the cacophony of voices overwhelming her senses. In a desperate bid to escape, Sarah stumbled back to the beach. As she did, the whispers faded, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Gasping for breath, she looked back at the ocean. The figure was gone, the waves lapping gently as if nothing had happened. Shaken, Sarah returned to her campfire, her mind racing. She knew now that Mark's spirit was trapped, bound to the place where he had disappeared. The realization brought a strange mix of sorrow and relief. He was still there, in some form, but unreachable. Determined to honor his memory, she decided to tell their story, hoping to find some semblance of peace. As she packed up the next morning, she cast one last glance at the ocean. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a shadowy figure watching her, but when she blinked, it was gone. The beach remained as enigmatic as ever, a place where the living and the lost coexisted, their fates intertwined by the vanishing waves. The Anderson family arrived at the secluded island, eager to spend a week away from their busy lives. The island was a paradise of pristine beaches, crystal clear waters, and lush greenery. As the sun set on their first day, they gathered around a bonfire on the beach, toasting marshmallows and telling stories. While exploring the shoreline, young Lily stumbled upon an ancient-looking bottle half buried in the sand. The glass was dark and worn, sealed with a crumbling cork. She ran back to her parents, waving the bottle excitedly. "Look what I found," she exclaimed. Her father David examined the bottle, intrigued by its antiquity. "This is interesting," he said, showing it to his wife Laura. Laura took the bottle and noticed a piece of parchment inside. She carefully pried out the cork and unfurled the note. The handwriting was barely legible, written in a language neither of them could recognize. At the bottom, there was a crude drawing of a figure and a warning in broken English. "Beware the curse. Do not release." David chuckled. "It's probably just some old sailor's superstition. Let's see what's inside." Ignoring Laura's uneasy glance, he broke the seal and opened the bottle. A sudden gust of wind blew through the campfire, making the flames flicker wildly. A low, ominous whisper seemed to emanate from the bottle, but David shrugged it off as his imagination. The next morning, the family woke to an eerie stillness. The island, which had felt so welcoming, now seemed to watch them with unseen eyes. Strange occurrences began almost immediately. Laura found objects in their villa moved to strange places, and Lily complained of seeing shadows moving in the corners of her vision. On the second night, Laura woke to the sound of faint whispers. She turned to find Lily standing at the foot of their bed, her eyes wide and terrified. "Mommy, there's someone in my room," she whispered. David and Laura rushed to Lily's room, but found it empty. The windows were shut tight, and there was no sign of an intruder. They reassured Lily and put her back to bed, but neither parent could shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Over the next few days, the disturbances escalated. They heard footsteps in the halls at night, saw reflections in mirrors that didn't belong to them, and felt a growing sense of dread. Laura began researching the island's history and discovered a dark legend. Centuries ago, the island had been home to a tribe that practiced dark rituals. The bottle, she learned, was a vessel used to trap malevolent spirits. Realizing their mistake, Laura confronted David. "We need to do something about this. We released something evil." David, now equally unnerved, agreed. They decided to seek help from the island's caretaker, an elderly man named Elias, who lived near the beach. Elias listened to their story with a grave expression. "You have awakened the spirit of the cursed shaman," Elias said. "He was trapped in that bottle by the island's ancestors to protect us. Now that he is free, he will torment anyone who crosses his path." "Is there any way to stop him?" Laura asked, desperation in her voice. Elias nodded. "There is a ritual that might work, but it is dangerous. You must perform it at the place where you found the bottle and recite an incantation to bind the spirit once more. But be warned, the spirit will resist." Armed with this knowledge, the family returned to the beach that night, the bottle and a hastily written incantation in hand. The wind howled around them as they began the ritual. David held the bottle aloft while Laura recited the ancient words. The air grew icy, and a dark shadow rose from the bottle, forming into a terrifying figure. The spirit shrieked in rage, the sound piercing their ears and rattling their bones. Lily clung to her mother, eyes wide with fear. "Keep going!" David shouted over the roar of the wind. Laura's voice wavered, but she continued, the incantation growing louder and more urgent. The spirit lunged at them, its form flickering and distorted. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, the final words left Laura's lips, and the spirit was sucked back into the bottle with a deafening roar. The wind ceased, and an eerie calm settled over the island. The family stood in silence, trembling but relieved. They quickly sealed the bottle and buried it deep in the sand, hoping it would never be found again. As they packed their things the next day, Elias came to see them off. "You were brave to face the spirit," he said. "But remember, some curses are never truly broken. Leave this place and do not return." The Anderson family boarded their boat, leaving the cursed island behind. They knew they would never forget the terror they had faced, and they carried with them a newfound respect for the unseen forces that lurked in the world. The island remained a distant memory, a beautiful but haunted place where they had come face to face with the darkness of the past.